excited to be here at the Air Show with everyone, and we're really thrilled to be joined by these amazing education leaders from New York City Public Schools. My name is Jennie Magiera. I'm the Global Head of Education Impact at Google. Longtime educator, newbie Googler, 4 years in, and I'm joined by my amazing colleague, Shanika, who is the Director of Education Social Impact at google.org. So she gets to do all the wonderful things to uplift educators around the world. And then we also have Jade Grieve here, who is the Chief of Student Pathways at New York City Public Schools, thinking about how to create those futures for young people in the city of New York. And of course, last but not least, we have Delia Veve, who is the Chief of Curriculum Instruction. I heard she's been at New York Public Schools for 22 years. So she is a longtime New York City veteran. Today, we're going to dive right in and we're going to ask the question that many educators are wondering. And I'm going to direct this first question at my colleague, Shanika, which is, are the AI overlords going to steal all our jobs and replace us with robots?
Yes. No, in all actuality, what we know and understand is, yes, the education space is shifting and pivoting. There's a lot of change happening, but that change is largely driven by the needs of our teachers and our students. AI is a tool. It's a tool that can build and enhance on the capabilities of the human experience of teaching and learning. And one of the things that informs a lot of how we think about this work as we support districts like New York City and others is we think about some of the statistics that we're constantly paying attention to. So there was a recent study that was focused on the state of teaching and learning. And that study found a few things that's been interesting. And I think really are apropos to this idea of what is the role of AI. So 8 out of 10 educators have, in the last year, have expressed an increase of workload on their day-to-day. 7 out of 10 educators have also indicated that they're spending more time on addressing learning loss with their students. And then 1 out of 2 educators have also expressed that they're spending an incredible amount of time on planning. This is the opportunity of AI. It's really to help teachers to become the center, to elevate them so that they can focus on the real important work of shoulder to shoulder, while also helping to personalize and differentiate instruction. So we want to free teachers up from the things that can pull them away from really focusing on teaching and learning. So AI is not going to steal and take all of their jobs. It really is to enhance and be an extension of that human element of teaching and learning.
I love that, and I love that it's really help enhancing and elevating the educator. And as we're thinking about educators who are preparing their young people for their bright futures, you like that? Bright futures, New York City, nailed it.
Love it, Jennie.
As we're thinking about that, we are all questioning in this education space, like, what do young people need to have? What are the competencies they need to be career ready? And I know your team looks after so much of that, of creating these types of programs. So from an industry, what do we need to be preparing young people to have to be successful in getting these jobs of the future?
Yeah, and you know, I think again, and many of us that are in this room, you're going to find that a lot of the knowledge and the skills that are really going to ready young learners for the future of work are the things that we already talk a lot about. It's thinking critically, it's judgment, it's reason, it's the ability to discern, to compare and contrast. What artificial intelligence will enable us to do is to really, instead of kind of focusing on and kind of this idea of like replacing what's going to happen in the classroom, it's really about how do we expose the what, sometimes, and then examine to what depth do we lean into the knowledge. And then how do we think about building instruction that's going to move the learner up that Bloom's taxonomy? So the skills are very much the same about judgment, reason, thinking critically. And then what we want to challenge and think and push educators to think about is how are you using tools to double down on learn by doing, to reflect what's happening in the real world. So we want kids to learn by doing. And that's really what we see as the opportunity. The skills are still very much the skills. The knowledge that kids need to know and understand, still need to understand numeracy, number sense, still need to be able to read, to read for learning. But it's really around how are these tools being used responsibly and how do these tools help move our learners up that Bloom's taxonomy.
That's really interesting, and I really appreciate you doubling down on that like learning by doing piece and like thinking about these pathways to that career. And Jade, I know that you've been working closely with Shanika's team about these career pathways and all these different programs that we offer, like CS for All and Code Next. And so your team is creating these pathways and these learning by doing experiences for young people in New York. Can you tell us more about what you're doing?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for the opportunity. So as you've heard, kind of our mantra and our theme is bright starts and bold futures. And when we think about bold futures, we're really setting ourselves a much bigger goal for the role that we have in preparing young people for where they're heading after school. I think we know from the data and all the things that we see, it's no longer enough to just have a high school diploma. You need more than that to get the skills, the credentials, the experience to be set up well for these jobs of the future. So that means that we have to integrate college and career into school, and particularly into high school, to make sure young people are leaving with that level of preparation and that sense of what's possible. So we've made a really big investment in career pathways in our Bold Futures work, and that looks like two things. So one, we know that just with the pace of change that's happening in the world of work, there are really like 21st century literacies that every young person needs, regardless of which pathway you're following. So Jennie, you mentioned the CS for All work, which has been our long-standing computer science initiative. That's 9 years in. And we're now looking at that thinking, well, including with, as we sit here, the way in which AI is changing work, changing the opportunities out there, how are we integrating that into the programs that we have? And that's something that everyone needs, those foundational kinds of experiences and skills. And then secondly, because we know that the kind of expectations and demands keep rising as technology changes and levels up the kind of work and opportunities out there, we need to make sure students are getting much more rigorous experiences that really give them a sense of what's possible, the skills that were mentioned that they need, and really giving them their kind of first sense of professional network. So we launched Future Ready 2 years ago. We've started in areas where we know there's lots of opportunity and demand for young people, but often if you don't get that first foot in the door, you don't have that professional network, you haven't seen someone who can give you a sense of this is how I got here and this is what this job looks like, you're not going to follow that path. And so in the technology pathways that we're building, and we're so grateful to our partnership with Google, we focus in a few areas, one of them being data science, which is maybe a good example to give in this context. And what it means, if you imagine you're back in high school for a minute, blended into your high school experience in the 9th grade, you're doing much more career exploration. The 9th and the 10th grade, you're doing that in the classroom, and you're getting the chance to go to a place like a Google office and learn from Googlers about what their job looks like, the way in which technology is changing their job, what they see, how they see the future changing, and how young people should be thinking about that. And to be honest, when we talk about the kinds of skills young people need, many of these, as you said, are applied. They're learning by doing. It's a different thing to say, here's what it means to be career ready, go and do. But to have the chance to practice that in a work setting with professionals, to see that being modeled, that's really what we want to open up. So students are getting the chance to, in early grades, different opportunities around career exposure, going to businesses for a whole day, in different places and learning about those jobs and the skills. And then going kind of through their high school experience, that leads up into other opportunities like internships and workplace challenges where you get the chance to hands-on solve real industry problems. And that is a really important way to both build the skills and get a sense of yourself in that occupation. It's much better if you can do that in earlier days and earlier grades with us than when you've left school. I think so you can really have a sense of what you're interested in and what's really possible. And then in addition to that, what we're also doing, and we're so grateful to our partners, including Google for this, is we're building new courses. Some of these courses didn't exist before in high school. So one that we're building in our technology and our data science pathway is around data visualization, use of large language models. And that's going to be, I think, a very sought after course that students will be interested in, but also giving them not just a sense of the foundational skills, but what that looks like applied in context of work. And then we're also partnering with our post-secondary partners like CUNY and SUNY to provide young people with early college credit. So instead of just turning up at college being ready to go into a degree, you're turning up with college credit in your back pocket, and you can complete faster, which is going to save you time and save money, and it is really compelling to young people. And one of the things that we've been able to do, which I think is one of the big innovations here, is also take these amazing credentials that are giving people opportunities into different work paths, like the Grow with Google certifications, and build that into school. So both the educators get the chance to take those credentials as they're thinking about teaching them and how that lives in their classroom, and the students do too. So that gives them a real sense of like power and possibility. They've got something in their, they've got something in addition to their high school diploma that can take them in the direction that they want to go. So that's just one example through the technology and the data science prism, but we're doing that across lots of industries. But I think this concept of learning by doing, the applied learning, and really giving young people a chance to not just think they know about what the jobs are that are out there, but actually experiencing them and learn from people who are creating that future is really what we're trying to unlock.
I love that. And I think what's really amazing about the work that you're doing and the intentionality of the program is that it is so vertical. You're not waiting to the last year or two that these young people are in your classrooms, but you're building that hunger, that curiosity, that interest from a young age. I always used to joke with fellow education leaders. We'd be like, yeah, we're building for college and career readiness. But it was like college and career readiness. And the programs that we had for the latter were few and far between, but the way that you're using the community around you, your partners, to lift people up and give them that hands-on learning by doing experience is a real model for all of us to look towards. You know, I was saying to these ladies prior to preparing for this panel, my background is I did start off in New York City Public Schools for a hot second right out of university, but the majority of my career was in Chicago Public Schools, the second city. And we would look to New York City and we'd be like, well, what are they doing? What's New York doing? And I think so many of us do. New York is the largest school system in the United States, and so many of us internationally look to New York City Public Schools, no pressure, to see what you're doing. And I asked their permission to name another elephant in the room. When it comes to AI and education, some of us might remember that New York City was a district that decided to say, let's pump the brakes on AI. We don't want teachers using it, or I don't know about this. And we all saw it and we're like, oh no, should we not be doing this? And then now if you look at the character arc of where the district has gone, it's one of the most forward-thinking, innovative school districts. And as Spider-Man's uncle and Voltaire have both said, with great power comes great responsibility. So Jade, as a long-term educator, I know that you served in a high school in Manhattan for a while as well. Sorry, Jade, undo say. Rewind. Delia, thinking about your work, like serving a school of 400 to now serving the entire city of New York, you were saying backstage, you have to be really intentional with the choices that you make because everyone is looking to see what you do. So as you're bringing these powerful tools into the classrooms in New York City, what are some of the things you're trying to consider?
Absolutely. And I think, these other two women just spoke before me and said many of the things that we're trying to do. One is thinking about what is it that we're actually doing that's preparing students for their futures. But then two, thinking about what are these tools that we are using that actually help teachers to do it, that we're not adding on and sort of just layering and layering and layering and continuing to ask people to do more and more and more, but rather how are we thinking about this is a tool that either can amplify work that you're already doing or automate some work that doesn't require the human touch so that you can spend more time doing the human things that we know that AI cannot replace us in doing. And so we're really looking, in a system as large as New York City, we have to look and see where are there bright spots of this work happening? And then look and see, well, what would it look like for that to be scaled across the city? And so that's really where we are right now, right? AI is new, and I think we would be lying and giving people a false sense of yes, we figured it out, and here is the pathway to doing it. But what we're really trying to do is look and see where are there teachers who are doing this really well? Where are there programs like Jade's Future Ready programs where they're really making connections between the skills that students need in the future? And then think about, well, if they need that in high school, what does that look like in kindergarten? And how do we integrate that into the curriculum in a way that doesn't become burdensome or just sort of as an aside? And so I think that one, the AI is showing us the competencies that students need, but it's also giving us the tools that our teachers need in order to develop those competencies for our kids.
And if I could double click on that point really quickly, because I think that's a really important point. I think that's another way that AI could also play a role is with that reverse engineering or that backward mapping to find the opportunities to say, okay, this is a place where we could lean in more or maybe do less, and the opportunity of the tool itself could play a different role. So I think that's a really important point, and I really think your point around the intentionality of not layering or burdening the teacher, but being really intentional and indexing on the right sets of skills and knowledges. I think that's really important.
And to the point that you're making is thinking about the burden piece and how are we, like the intentionality, we're wondering the teachers who are like shying away from it where that intent is not happening, when we're like, hey, let's just bring it in because it's cool and I went to a conference and I saw it. And so we see some teachers shying away out of fear, out of just having too much on their plate. And you are naming that that does create an equity gap. So how are you thinking about ensuring maintaining equity of access, opportunity, and learning experience across all the children in your vast city?
Oof.
No big deal.
Every day we're trying to do that. But I go back to really thinking about integration, right? And rather than saying, this is something you have to do on top of everything else that you're doing, but how are we being, I'm gonna repeat myself, how are we being intentional and thinking about, we're using this tool and it's actually solving a problem that exists versus, oh, we have this tool, use it. And just use it for the sake of using it. But to what end are we using this tool and how can we do that? And just really thinking thoughtfully about how do we make sure that a tool works for everyone and that it's not just like, oh, because it worked in this school with this amazing teacher, that it can just automatically go across the system and work. We have to think about how can it serve our most needy students as well.
Can I just jump in
Yes,
on that
please.
quickly? I think the other thing, and I use the word intentionality all the time in the work that I do too, so I appreciate you lifting that up. I think that as much as we also talk about like students needing exposure to understand like what is out there, what's the opportunity, what's the sense of possibility, we also, and the Chancellor talks about this a lot as well, the same has to be true on the educator side. And so with the Computer Science for All program that we've had running, we've been able to leverage some of that in our partnerships across our different divisions to really roll out some educator like materials so they can have a sense of like, what does this look like and what does it mean before you get to those specific questions too about tools. So we've had over 2,000 educators take that course. And I think that's a really important part just in terms of that foundational access and awareness.
Well, sadly, our time is over. We could stay here with these amazing ladies all day. I know you want to, but just to close up, I want to leave you with one thought or one word I'm taking away from everything I learned from each of you. So Delia, intentionality, I think is the word that's resonating with all of us. Jade, authenticity. I think there's so much authenticity in the work that you're doing of the experiences. And Shanika, everything that you say really is about humanity and doubling down on the people that are really involved in this equation. So thank you all for your time today. Thank you for being here, and thank you to everyone on the panel.